In today's video, we're going to explain the 6 changes every retiree should make in their 50s to prepare for retirement. Over many years operating in the finance industry, I've seen how difficult it can be for future retirees to know if they're ready for the next stage of life. The truth is, retirement doesn't have to be complicated, which is why in today's video, we'll be breaking down the 6 changes you should make in your 50s to enter retirement in your 60s stress-free. Okay, number 1, stop financially supporting adult children. I've seen this too many times over the years where people's retirement was actually put in jeopardy because their adult children just couldn't stop taking from the parents. I've seen people who were adults that racked up huge credit card balances and their parents had to go in and pay them off. In worse situations, I've seen where they had dependency issues and the parents had to not only support rehab, which is extremely expensive, but they also got in trouble with the law. And then, imagine how much it costs to pay for lawyers and all of these types of things. And so it really put their parents in financial jeopardy to have to continuously bail out their adult children. Now, one thing I never want this channel to be about is for me to sit here and wag my finger at you and make you feel guilty about lifestyle choices or situations like this. But in this instance, something has to give here, and if your child is putting you in jeopardy of living in poverty later in your retirement because they can't get their act together, well, you need to do something about it. And quite frankly, you might also be part of the problem through enabling them. You got to face up to the reality. I'm not an expert on this. I'm not a psychologist, but where I would start if this were happening to me, I would look online. There's other people that are in this situation, and there's probably actually research on this very topic. So first of all, I would gather all the research I can. That way I've got a baseline of what I'm looking at and what types of strategies might be effective at dealing with this. Then I would suggest looking and finding some type of therapist who maybe specializes in these types of situations. That way you guys can strategize what's the best plan of going forward, cutting the kids off. And then number 2, if your kids try to make you feel guilty or you just feel guilty in general about it, you're going to have somebody there that can help support you through this tough transition. Okay, now let's go to number 2, where it's time to focus on shifting your mindset from building wealth to actually managing it effectively during your retirement. And that's number 2, shifting focus from accumulation to a withdrawal strategy. In your 50s, the goal should shift from building wealth to making sure that the wealth you've accumulated can last through your retirement. If you don't have a clear strategy on how to draw down your assets, you may outlive your savings or withdraw too much too soon. So what you want to do once you reach your late 50s is you got to develop a withdrawal strategy that's going to factor in your income needs, taxes, expected longevity, everything we typically talk about on this channel. I know I'm biased, but work with a financial planner to at least set up some type of plan for this so you can determine the optimal order of withdrawing from your accounts. Now, we can only cover this topic in so much detail for this video as we have to move on to the next point, but we'll actually be breaking this down in far more detail in a video soon, so be sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss out on that. And with that, that brings us to change number 3, and that's stop making luxury purchases that deplete your savings. Now, of course, this is going to be dependent on your situation. If you have $50 million or more, it probably doesn't matter. But if you only have $1 or $2 million, purchasing luxury European autos when you're in your late 50s is probably a poor idea. If you're spending money on luxury items like high-end cars, extravagant vacations, or unnecessary gadgets, you can quickly erode your savings at probably the worst time for you. So this is a situation where you're going to have to sit down, be honest with yourself, and come up with a plan where you start spending more for what you need instead of what you want. And that doesn't mean you have to live like a pauper. All it means is that maybe instead of buying that luxury European car, you look for something more reasonable that isn't going to have high maintenance costs, a high depreciation value, and is simply reliable, gets you from point A to point B. You can still travel, just maybe you don't need to fly in first class and stay at the Four Seasons. At the end of the day, you're going to have to remind yourself that freedom and security of retirement are worth more than many of these luxuries that maybe you were used to having. As you rethink luxury purchases, the next step is to focus on protecting what you've already saved. And that's where shifting your investment strategy comes in. So that's change number 4. Shift your investment focus from growth to preservation. When you're getting close to retirement, your savings become more vulnerable to market volatility. There's an idea, something called sequence of return risk, and what that means is that if you're drawing down from your portfolio to supplement your living expenses in retirement, you may hit a bad stretch of returns that causes you to deplete your savings early. This isn't just theoretical. It's very simple to show this mathematically, and you could go back to different periods in the history of the United States stock market and see that people would have run out of funds early had they just happened to randomly retire when they hit one of these bad periods. Now, again, everybody's situation is different. If you have pensions and annuities and Social Security and that's going to cover all your needs, this might not be as big of a focus for you. But like I said, if you're going to be drawing from your portfolio to live, you should pay attention. Just because we've had a great run recently, people forget that hasn't always been the case. And in fact, we've had, over the last 15 years, extraordinary returns in the stock market. And historically, when that happens, in the future, that leads to subpar returns. And so you may be retiring right into one of those windows and you have no control over that. So what can you do, right? Well, I would suggest looking to reduce exposure to high-risk assets like stocks and move towards things that are more stable, like income-producing investments. That could be bonds. That could be maybe some dividend-paying type stocks. There's actually lots of ideas on this, and I talk about some of them on this channel as well. But the reality is you should work with your advisor and find the right mix for you. And if you want more detail on how we could help you make this exact change to your retirement plans, click the link in the description to book a complimentary call with me and we can break all of this down for you. Now, let's talk about an often overlooked part of retirement planning, and that's number 5, changing from a career identity to an identity of life after work. A lot of people define themselves by their careers, and a huge issue for retirees who transition into retirement is that they kind of lose their sense of purpose and who they are, because so much of it is wrapped up into what they did for a living. And that's one of the big reasons why you find that rates of depression for retirees are actually quite high. So that's why it's very important before you actually retire to start shifting your identity away from that career. You can explore interests outside of work. That might be volunteering, joining community groups. You might pick up a new hobby, but I strongly suggest that it has some type of social component, because what they find is that's going to be the most effective as far as keeping you happy. But you need to create a plan now for how you're going to spend your time once your work responsibilities end. So building relationships and connections in these areas now is going to help make that transition smoother when you finally do retire. And that brings us to our final change, which is somewhat related, and that's number 6. Stop prioritizing your career over health and well-being. As you get closer to retirement, maintaining good health is increasingly important. So many people just work themselves to the bone, but once you're in your late 50s, there's probably virtually no upside to continuing to do that, because you probably already reached your max career earnings at that point, and hopefully you've accumulated a nice nest egg. So if you're in that phase, I'm going to tell you, you need to start making the transition now to building healthy habits. Start setting boundaries at work, and then ensure that you've got enough time for exercise, relaxation, and medical appointments, right? You need to create routines that are going to support both your mental and physical health. So I'd strongly suggest prioritizing preventative care and, doing things like annual checkups and screenings, and that way you can avoid significant health problems later, hopefully. Now, I get it. These changes are going to feel uncomfortable at first, but they're critical to setting yourself up for secure and fulfilling retirement. I've seen it time and time again. They really work. So if you want more detail on how we can help you make these kind of changes for your retirement plans, click the link in the description to book a complimentary call with me, and we can see what might work for you. Thanks for watching.